Given the ongoing carnage in Palestine, most countries support a two-state solution. They are all wrong. The two-state solution would give Palestinians sovereignty, while living in bombed-out rubble and economic despair, scavenging for foreign aid, performing menial labor for Israel. This sovereignty would be a sham. Israel would be asked to cede territory, to establish an extremely hostile state, right beside it, ready for rearming by Iran. Non-starter. Sham on one side, non-starter on the other. Does no one see this? Since 1948, all attempts to permanently solve the Palestine problem have failed. Their common denominator? They considered Palestine a zero-sum contest over finite territory. Now let an outsider suggest the obvious non-zero-sum solution. An artful deal gives each side what it most wants, while giving up what it values least. What does Israel most want? Secure borders that can't be tunneled under. Average Palestinians? Surely not an independent state beside Israel so the war can continue. Average Palestinians want what most of us want: safety, material well-being, hope. What do the oil-wealthy Arab states want? Peace, to protect their economic interests, prestige and influence on the world stage. Derailment of Iran's global ambitions. Meanwhile, these states have $4 trillion accumulated wealth and a demonstrated eagerness to spend money for their long-term objectives. What do the US and other Western powers need? They need a quick solution that is also long-term, in order to be responsive to significant pro-Palestinian sympathies among their electorates. They must be seen to stand by Israel, while ensuring a positive outcome for the Palestinians. So far, they're not anywhere close. Failure would endanger the current ruling majorities or coalitions, and, by splintering the left and center, give power to isolationists. That in turn would imperil Ukraine, Taiwan, and ultimately the free world. I have a deal for all four of you. The obvious non-zero-sum solution is not two states side by side, but two states far apart. Here's the deal. The oil-wealthy Arab states establish a pot of, say, $200 billion for land acquisition and development. This may sound absurdly large to the average person, but not to countries sitting on $4 trillion. Purchase 10,000 square kilometers, roughly Gaza and the West Bank combined, somewhere removed from Israel, on which to establish a sovereign new Palestine. Saudi Arabia could simply donate some of its Red Sea coast for humanitarian motives. An alternative, a cash acquisition possibility, is Egypt's southwestern Sinai, isolated by mountains. Another is Jordan's northeastern protrusion, which it has hardly used since receiving it free in 1922. 6 more countries in North Africa might have parcels of land they might consider trading for cash. With 9 potential site sources, and only one site needed, chances are that one country will step up to be the hero. Even after a ceasefire, few will risk money in perennial war zones like Gaza and the West Bank. But financial, technology, and business interests all over the world would support a new Palestine, provided it is somewhere else. Please see videos 1, 2, and 3 in this series for more details on the non-zero-sum solution. Predictable objections. Dunning-Kruger ad hominem objection. You, author, are not a Middle East expert. You don't know the depth of your ignorance. Ad hominem rebuttal. Most real breakthroughs come from outsiders with uncluttered brains. No intellectual axes to grind. No pet beliefs. In 75 years, the experts have utterly failed to solve the Palestine problem and their present two-state solution. Forgive, forget, just play nice from now on is patently stupid. Simply ask, which area within geographic Palestine should go to the newly sovereign state of Palestine? And from the inescapable practical consequences of any choice, you will immediately see its stupidity. Objection. The mutual hatred runs too deep. Precisely why we need to separate them. Objection. The Palestinians are too proud, won't leave. Untrue. Millions already left after past wars, and many more would follow, if they had somewhere to go. An immediate majority isn't even needed. In 1948, Israel had 850,000 Jewish inhabitants. It was a case of, if we build it, they will come. So is New Palestine. Objection. Why evict? The Palestinians and not the Jews? This is not an eviction, but an incentive. There is no imaginable inducement which would persuade Israelis to move, while a sovereign New Palestine in a decent location would certainly attract many Palestinians. We can keep nurturing a grudge, however legitimate, forever arguing over blighted terrain, with very poor prospects for future security and prosperity. Or we can move on. Objection. The oil-rich states won't contribute. If they carefully consider the broader situation, they will. In the Palestine context, the Arab states have postured as victims of Israeli aggression and foreign meddling. Here is a chance to show the world that they can take assertive, meaningful action and be heroes instead of victims. $200 billion is cheap, less than Qatar spent to host the 2022 FIFA Games. And if they don't spend it now, it will cost them more later if Iran wins leadership over the Islamic world, most of which is not Arab. Objection. No deal without considering Islamic access to the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. Never mind what this issue even is. It is a red herring and a deliberate roadblock, like agreeing to your friend's choice of movie, only if you can also get a date with the lead actor. The people who raise this requirement are those showing off how much they know, or who don't want a meaningful solution at all. Most of them are not starving in Gaza, but well-fed, and free to pontificate, from the safety and comfort of Tehran or Berlin. Objection. But this gives Israel almost everything it wants. Zero-sum thinking. Instead of begrudging what Israel gets, focus on how all the parties come out way ahead, considering the realistic alternatives for each. Objection. This plan doesn't provide for the release of hostages. Neither does it cure cancer, but it will certainly avert more deaths than continued warfare, or an imposed two states side by side. Once a ceasefire is declared, humanitarian aid starts flowing, and the prospect of a real long-term solution is evident. Hamas's leaders will be more amenable to releasing hostages. Objection. Israel still won't agree. So far, Israel not been offered anything valuable in exchange for a ceasefire, given a clear chance to achieve its security goals, and indeed all its legitimate goals. It would have to agree, or the world would rightly condemn its war as genocidal, rather than defensive in intent. Objection. Hamas won't agree. Hamas doesn't have to. We can hope that most members of Hamas are rational, and will consider that New Palestine represents mission accomplished for them. The irrational elements could still cause disruption with ambushes or suicide bombings, but that risk exists anywhere in the world, and would be much higher in an imposed two states side-by-side outcome. Two states far apart offers by far the lesser risk of continued terrorism or harm to hostages. Objection. Building a country from scratch is impossible. Whatever problems are foreseen for a new Palestine somewhere else, they are worse for rebuilding Palestine amidst the rubble. China has routinely built cities for tens of millions in the last decades. So could the US, Japan, and the EU if they were so inclined. The world's best and brightest in their fields, from constitutional law to scientific research to engineering and modular construction, wouldn't support a hopeless cause in Gaza, but might contribute their energy and genius to New Palestine. Hundreds of Palestinians are dying daily, and the world is creeping closer to a broader conflict that will upturn the world order. The decision-makers need to practice some humility, accept sensible advice from an outsider, and start implementing a two-states but far apart solution. This will give all four parties exactly what they most need, at costs they can tolerate. If we build New Palestine, they will come.